Established in 1985, John Haynes owned a collection of nearly 30 cars which he stored all over the county. And now, 33 years later, the Haynes International Motor Museum is a thriving haven for car enthusiasts. I'm going to show you the day-to-day workings of one of the largest classic car collections in the UK. Established in the 1980s, the workshop was solely dedicated to the museum collection. Now, 30 years later, they provide expert labour from clients all over the globe. Let's go talk to the manager Bradley and see what he does.
Okay, so some work we've done with the Motor Museum, so probably about 10% of our time in the workshops is spent working on the Motor Museum's cars and the rest of the time on clients. So some stuff we've sort of currently got in and other things we've just finished. Full engine rebuild on the Ferrari 512 Berlinetta Boxer. That's a pretty major job, about 120 hours just solely on engine rebuild. It'll probably take us 2 to 3 days just to balance the carburetors on that. Then we've got Aston Martin DB4 Series 2. That's having a full nut and bolt restoration. And that can be seen in the body shop at the moment because it's down to bare metal. We've remade the door skins and done various other repairs to the aluminium body as well as some to the steel monocoque. Also rebuilt the engine on that one as well. That can be seen in the workshops at the moment. The Gordon Keeble, that's just undergone some electrical wiring that needed to be done behind the dash because it all burnt out, so that's all been restored and dash and everything has gone back together. Then some things that have sort of finished in the Motor Museum recently. Jaguar XJ220s that had full service. That job is bill-wise circa around £15,000 just for a service. And then another one we did a little while ago, the 1966 Mustang, and that was a full body restoration on that. That's in the Red Room. So I've been here now, I'm in my 18th year. I started here cleaning the cars at weekends when I was at school. I went through to do an apprenticeship in light vehicle mechanics. That went on to do a HNC in workshop management. Took on the workshop manager's job at 23. I've been doing it for 9 years. It's all very exciting. But in my time here I've seen some huge changes. When I first started, all I did was work on the Motor Museum's cars. We did very little client work. And that's now changed completely the opposite way around, where we do mostly client work and very little museums work. But it's all for the best. We've had new workshops built, or 2 new workshops built over this amount of time, and the museum's gone through a fairly major reconstruction itself. So yeah, it's all very good.
Fixing and restoring cars is one thing, but whose job is it to look after the cars once they are restored? The curator has the task of making sure that all the cars in the collection stay in good condition. Matt Piper is here to give us an insight into what he does.
The role of curator here at the museum involves a lot of different things, including first and foremost the subject expert relating to our collection. We've got hundreds of motor cars, motorcycles as well, but also it's always worth noting that the collection doesn't just contain vehicles. We have thousands and thousands of other items, all relating to motoring. So for example, believe it or not, the largest part of our collection is in fact our archive, which contains thousands and thousands of magazines, books, manuals, advertising material, photographs, and obviously I don't know exactly what's in our archive, but I have a very good broad understanding of what's in there. But when it comes to the vehicles, my knowledge is much deeper, because I've been here for 8 years. Over those years I've done a lot of research into them, and whilst almost invariably that work has to be committed to paper, goes on our database, our catalogue for example, but a lot of it stays up here as well, and so I will never say that I know everything about our collection and what's in it, but more often than not I can tell you something about most of the cars and bikes that we have. Something else that I'm very much involved in is the interpretation of the collection. It's to say it's relatively easy to have such a large collection would be an understatement, but we've collected the cars, we have very large galleries containing them, but that isn't just the end of the story. We don't just put the cars into the galleries in a kind of a generic way. There is actually meaning to the way that they're displayed, and so interpretation is all down to actually explaining to people why we have a group of cars together, for example, giving details about the cars, but also expanding that. A lot of these vehicles have very interesting stories to tell, not only about themselves. I don't know, take for example the Model T Ford we have in our collection. It is one of the most significant motor cars in motoring history, but then what spins off from that, and this is one of the things that I'm really interested in my job, my role here at the museum, is that you can look at something on so many different levels. There's always a person, invariably a man, behind the car. So in the case of the Ford, we have Henry Ford. We have Detroit, where the Motor City in America, in Michigan, where cars were made. There's a social aspect. There's the people that made the cars. There's the people that bought them. Model T Fords were made to be very cheap, and they brought motoring to the masses. On the other hand, you have lots of cars that are very expensive and could only be afforded by relatively few people. So there are so many stories and angles that you can approach when you interpret a collection. Another example, bearing in mind we have hundreds of cars, they're all different colours. We decided many years ago that we would actually interpret part of the collection by just looking at its colour. So we have a red room, which I think is fair to say is world famous, that contains just sporting and grand touring cars. They all have to be red, of course, and I hasten to add that we do not, and never have, and never will, change a car's colour just to put it in that room. But red is a colour that can evoke certain feelings. Red could be said to be a passionate colour, quite an exciting colour, maybe even an angry colour, and it's a colour that is quite often associated with sporting cars, like Ferraris, for example. And so rather than just having a room full of, I don't know, Fords or Ferraris or whatever, we've got a room full of red cars, and the effect of that is absolutely stunning. There are so many things that I do in my job, but another thing that I really like doing is researching. The cars can't talk, of course, and some of them are very old now. We have cars that go back to the very dawn of motoring. and are therefore 100, 110, 120 years old. And just think, not only in the car's age itself, but in society, in the world around it, so much has happened during that time. A lot of our cars we still don't know very much about. It will take many years for me to do all the research that I want to, but there are many years ahead of this museum for us to do that, which is very exciting.
Now you can restore a car and you can fix it. How do you get hold of the car to achieve that? With a mix of personally owned by the Haynes family and ones donated by the public, the collections department is on an around-the-clock mission to get the best cars on display. The collections manager Darren is here to give us an insight into what he does.
So in the collections department we cover a range of disciplines, I suppose you'd call them. We're responsible for conservation, the care of the collection, education, exhibitions, and we have an archive and library, and all of those things combined make up the development of the collection, the care of the collection, the interpretation of the collection, the stories we choose to tell people when they visit, and hopefully all of that means that they go away from the museum with a good experience. They've learnt something. You know, one of the primary responsibilities of any museum is to educate its visitors. We are a small department. There are only 4 full-time positions, and one of those is very new. So we rely heavily on a large group of volunteers. They help us particularly with collections care, looking after the vehicles in the collection and the other objects that we have in the collection. We have about 50 all up that work mainly on quite a complex schedule of looking after the hundreds of vehicles in the collection on a rotating schedule, and it takes them about 4 weeks to get through all of the cars in the collection, cleaning them, dusting them, checking them for condition, etc. The collection's built up of not only vehicles. We have small objects, we have clothing, books and magazines, which are an enormous source of information in our archive, and all of those things together, hopefully when you exhibit them or present them to the public, tell interesting stories. That's really the main reason why we present our objects to the public. If it was only about preservation, then we'd keep things in a locked room and we'd never let people see them. But the most important thing is that we show them to the public, we use them to tell interesting stories, informative stories, and make sure that they leave knowing something that they didn't know before they visited, even if they're a motoring or a vehicle enthusiast. There's a lot goes on behind the scenes in a museum. You know, a lot of what we do, our colleagues in front of house and commercial, they're very front shop window, visitor experience type roles. We're the backroom boys, I guess, that do all the things that people don't realise that go into museum collections. You know, the admin around things entering and leaving the collection, organising loans, organising the catalogue, so we have all of our objects fully researched, so that we know everything about them, so that we can actually tell those interesting stories. All of that kind of thing goes on behind the scenes, and the average visitor doesn't realise that, you know, museums are about a lot more than just putting old things into a building and opening the doors and letting people see them. There's a whole profession and an area of standards that have to be reached when managing a museum collection. Ethically, it's quite a big responsibility. People donate things to the museum, things that often have a great deal of sentimental value to them, and they place those things into our care, and that's something we take very seriously. You know, they're not just forgotten about in a dusty room, and as I say, it's not the sort of work that people often see when they come to a museum or appreciate goes on.
only does the museum attract an international crowd for its shiny exhibits, but for the events that go on outside the museum as well. Breakfast clubs attract hundreds of people every single month. With a car breakfast club on the first Sunday and a bike on the third, it gives the public a chance to bring their wonderful riding vehicles in and show them off to the public. And if you're lucky, you can cop yourself a free breakfast club sticker or buy yourself a breakfast club t-shirt at reception. Now, even though the museum is about cars, not everything the museum does is about cars. The museum offers 2 huge Merlin suites, which can hold from 10 guests for a child's birthday party or 300 guests for a corporate gathering. With an exceptional team on hand, whatever event you choose, it will be one to remember. If you're a fan of classic cars or you just want a nice cuppa after a busy day, the Haynes International Motor Museum is a perfect place for you. With attractions both inside and out, there's something for everyone. And if you want to re-enter the museum for free, don't forget to gift aid your tickets when you come to reception. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you here soon.